little timer that shows. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our e-forum titled The Changing Landscape of Education. Now, allow me to make an announcement in our national language, Bahasa Melayu. Kehadiran akan dibuka selepas tamat talk show ini. So please wait till the end of the show and sign in your attendance, which will be made available at the end of the show. Okay, now that the announcements are out of the way, let's begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our e-forum, The Changing Landscape of Education. You know, with COVID-19 and its pandemic, we are all coping with this new way of being, the new norm, they call it. It has affected every area of our lives. Teaching and learning, too, have to undergo modifications and transformations. The landscape of teaching and learning many of us are familiar with is changing, and it's changing at a rapid pace. But many scholars and industrialists actually say that this was inevitable, is bound to happen sooner or later. The COVID-19 pandemic has just quickened the process. So we have with us panelists who share the same passion to explore the changing landscape of education. From the United States of America, we have Dr. Toni Hando, an instructional systems specialist, and Dr. Noriza, a senior instructional designer attached to the Iowa University in USA. And joining us today is also Dr. Margaret Gleeson, a senior lecturer and program director from Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. And from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, we have Puan Aliza Alwi, the head of the Department of Languages at the Institute of Teacher Education, Ilmu Khas campus. We, Assunta and Zarina, are your moderators for this online talk show.
Thank you, Dr. Assunta. So the concept of a teacher standing in front of a room full of students who listen and respond to direction is increasingly a thing of the past. So learning isn't restricted to within the classroom academic exercises anymore. Just because we taught something doesn't mean that students learned it. We also have to remember that just because we didn't teach it doesn't mean that students didn't learn it either. So the pandemic is forcing us to look at a truth that has always existed. Our traditional system mistakenly equates the delivery of curriculum with learning. The current situation has given us massive insights on shifting the trajectory of education from schools to homes, from content dissemination to purposeful interactive learning. So without wasting any more time, so let's listen from the US. How is the education landscape changing in the US, and how is teaching and learning changing in the American classroom? So we'll listen to Dr. Toni Hando and Dr. Noriza Abu Hassan Shaari. Dr. Toni?
Dr. Toni, are you able to join us? Okay, I think Dr. Toni has, probably because of some technical glitch, she is not in the screen now. Dr. Noriza, would you like to comment on how teaching and learning is changing in the American classroom?
Okay. I guess I could share my experience with what is happening at Upper Iowa University. Now, with the pandemic, it's, we were forced to be in a situation. Hello.
You were saying you were forced to be in a situation, oh, we have lost both our speakers from US, I think probably because of the line or internet. So it's okay. We still have with us another two speakers while we wait for them to try to come back into our talk show. So Dr. Margaret Gleeson, coming back to the same question. But how is education landscape changing in New Zealand?
Right. Hello, everybody. Can you see my slideshow at this point in time? I'm going to assume that you can.
Okay.
So, Selamat pagi and kia ora from New Zealand, everybody. So, I would like... I
We are
can
hearing it a bit choppy.
Yes. Okay, I will try. So
Yes.
on the screen, I have some of the areas where I think the educational landscape is changing most right now. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me, Dr. Assunta, to contribute to this wonderful opportunity. But back to my slides. So you will see that I'd start with the New Zealand curriculum, which came into being in 2007. But there have been significant changes in the last year because we are moving away from our former graduating teacher standards and code of ethics to something called our code, our standards. Now, this set of standards is centred on Te Takiwa Waitangi, which is the foundational document in New Zealand that demonstrates the partnership between Māori and non-Māori. So our new standards require all teachers in the country to teach their children as culturally located, but particularly to acknowledge that Māori learners must have the opportunity to learn as Māori and Pacific peoples as Pacific. Now that means that these learners bring to class values and understandings, epistemologies and family influences that may be different from those of teachers. There are two supporting documents, which are the bottom bullet point called Tapasa and Tātai, which set out how teachers might centre their teaching in a culturally sustaining manner. So, for teachers at our Faculty of Education, this has meant that we have had to redesign all of our initial teaching education programs so that they are consistent with these new documents. And I'm happy to say that our governing body, the Teaching Council, has approved these new changes, and they will take place next year. This year, however, COVID has impacted educational practices internationally and also influenced our schools in New Zealand. New Zealand schools and universities are accustomed to enjoying the diversity offered by large numbers of fee-paying international students. But closed borders meant that these students cannot enter New Zealand. Schools, in addition to learning online to a greater extent than ever before, are also feeling a financial pinch. And this is likely to result in a reduced curriculum. The first areas to face cuts are ESOL departments, where both international and refugee and migrant students receive support to develop academic language. So in conclusion, New Zealand is continuing to build an understanding of bicultural education and developing culturally sustaining teaching practices. Our classes are increasingly digital, and the decrease in international student numbers is affecting how multilingual students are taught. Kia ora.
All right, Kieran. Thank you, Dr. Margaret Gleeson. And so it looks like we have on board with us Toni. She's managed to come back. I think the internet line gave out. So would you like to?
Okay, Dr. Toni, okay, how is the education landscape changing in the US? And how is the teaching and learning changing in the American classroom?
All right. Let us hold on one moment while I make sure that I have my presentations. And
Okay. Don't worry, Toni. Take
Yeah.
your time.
Yeah.
I think the line was bad just now, so it kind of gave way. But with internet, I think we're all aware of this.
Yeah.
So Toni, if you're ready, you can take it off.
okay.
Yeah.
So what we are talking about the way that COVID has changed the educational landscape in the US. We are responding to this.
All right.
And even before the virus, there was more of an acceptance towards online learning from administrators, instructors, as well as students. There has been more research in online learning. Evaluation and assessment has let us know how the best method to instruct students is, and advances in technology, new information and communication technologies have also benefited the online learning trend. So in the US, we are looking at 4 different stages. Right now, we are in stage 3. But in stage 1, there was a rapid transition towards, they called it online learning, but it was not planned. It was putting what the teachers were doing in class and putting some of it online to give them a way to learn in an emergency. All right, phase 2, right now we're kind of looking at that, navigating what type of accesses we do have, what type of internet broadband. So over the summer, the communities, the instructional institutions started to put that in place. Right now we are in stage 3, and we are in the process of preparing for this new way of education and how this is going to look on a full-time basis. All right. Phase 4 is the unknown and how we are going to prepare for that in our future and in our children's future.
Yes.
So, like she said, it has caused changes in society, the way that we are educating and the challenges. So we are looking for new ways to teach, new ways to get a hold of our students, to help them, and to work within our community. So the HyFlex model offers some strategies to consider. So that's what I would like to say for where we are in the US. We are in the process of bringing that emergency teaching into a more permanent situation. And we are looking for ways to embrace what is going on in education.
Okay, Dr. Noriza, do you have anything to add about the changing landscape in the classrooms in America? How are the students accepting it, and how are fellow teachers coping with this new change?
Um, I was cut off just now. Sorry for that interruption. Um, what just to add on to what Toni is saying is that we are embracing a new way of uh, teaching and learning. So, for example, at Upper Iowa University, we are in the process of adopting or piloting the HyFlex model. And so I think I will let Dr. Toni kind of expand on that in the next minutes.
Later part of the show, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Noriza. And let's hear something from her in Malaysia. Yes, Toni, you have something to add?
Oh, I think that the students are also embracing this new idea. And the first phase, they were very upset because it was a change. So now they're kind of embracing that.
Yes, we too.
I think everybody is scared of change. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, but now the shift is on the students becoming independent learners. They no longer teacher is the sole provider of knowledge. So we are looking at the strategies based on the what you call it, technologies and all that. Yeah. Okay. So maybe let's listen what is changing in Malaysia now. Let's listen to Puan Aliza, Alwi.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. It's morning in Malaysia now. In Malaysia, let me just go back to the early 2000. We actually started, speaking as a teacher trainer, we actually started in our teacher training institute, training teachers who are teaching in smart schools as early as 2004, if I'm not mistaken. So the realization of using technology in the classroom, the importance of technology in the classroom, it happened like way before the pandemic. And in our Malaysian education blueprint, 2013 to 2025, we have 11 shifts to transform the education system to ensure that our students eventually be able to survive the future, and the future is now. It's the pandemic. The future happened so fast, and we were all caught by surprise. You see, so one of the shifts that in the Malaysian education blueprint, which is to leverage ICT to scale up the quality of learning across Malaysia. This is to ensure that everyone across Malaysia, all the students across Malaysia, have access to a quality education. If they cannot have a face to face, then they have to, are able to conduct online. Okay, and teachers were also introduced to programs like Microsoft, and we now have Google Classrooms, and the Ministry of Education also have their own online program, which is the Ilmu. Right? So some teachers have used these tools in project-based learning, classrooms, and in also some lessons, but not 100%. Okay, so classrooms were but and students in schools could not use their own device in class, but the schools have a classroom, computer like laboratory, where the teachers could use, but there's only one, so they have to take turns. In campuses like ours, our students do have did bring their own device to class. So in a way, they were using technology in the class. However, classes were still carried out in rooms. Materials, hard copies were used, and students were able to do a group work, together. But, with the pandemic, when everyone was at home, everyone had to actually use whatever resources that they had at the time online and using the internet, and they also had to accelerate their learning skills. They had to develop their own skills in using technology and also using the application that is available online. So in a way, the pandemic has thrown us into the deep end. Many of us were not prepared. Okay?
True.
Because to carry lessons on online virtual classrooms. So, however, the Minister of Education in Malaysia took some actions, one of which was having television education channel for students who were not able to use the internet to be able to attend, so to say, attend classes by going to this channel with lessons that are scheduled. So in a way, again, like what our moderator Zarina said just now, the teacher has become not the sole information provider. Teachers actually had to find ways to get students to find information online. And they also had to change their way of teaching. Facilitating does not mean you being there in the classroom, even though it's virtual. Facilitating would mean showing the students ways to find information. In language learning, ways to communicate with others, ways to listen to the other language, in our case, the English language. Platforms where they can practice the English language. So that's how the landscape has changed in Malaysia. And now that it's post MCO, now students can go back to school. Teachers also have got to adapt to the new ways now, in the way that even though the students are in the classroom, but they cannot huddle together to have group work, and they still have to keep the space between them, and that is another challenge as well. And with the students starting to use internet and applications, online applications during the go, teachers are now finding ways to actually get students to be engaged in the classroom and also outside the classroom using the technology. So how the landscape is changed in Malaysia.
Okay, thank you, Puan Aliza. I think one positive thing that comes out of this pandemic is that we have to look at the truth. The truth is that, which is right there in front of us, that maybe we are in denial to accept it, that things need to change. Some things need to change. So let's go back to US from Dr. Toni and Dr. Noriza to listen. I'm very excited about this HyFlex model that is the current trends in the future education of US. Okay, Dr. Toni?
All right. And I do feel that there were some very interesting things that were brought up in that the last speaker said, and in the idea of how do you educate, how do you motivate the students, and how do you get them to work with you. So as an educator, that is our primary thought. So what is the HyFlex model? How does it work? What are the challenges and what are the implications? So the HyFlex model does open up greater opportunities for learning and connection. Everyone learns differently. And so we want, some of us like more personal attention, some of us like to work independently. And by giving the option of being with the teacher at home, or even having a teacher be able to be remote, gives us these opportunities. So what is it? The HyFlex model is a combination of hybrid and flexible. So when we talk about hybrid learning or hybrid course, it combines the elements of online and face-to-face. And in this case, flexible. Each classroom and activity is offered in various different ways. So I think that one of the ideas we were looking at is, during class, you can have students on campus with the teacher, and then you can have the remote learners. And there are activities going on. After class, you have the option of having the activity, you have the on-campus learners, remote learners, and again, video collaboration, discussion. Then, before the class, you can also have the opportunity to view class recordings and on campus. Now, if you've ever heard of the flipped classroom, it is where students are required to view the recording of the class before they come in, and then they come into the class and they do the activities because they've already been prepared. So this HyFlex model kind of fits in with that idea of having a flipped classroom, which has gained a lot of popularity. So what do you as the instructor need? I think most importantly, you need the course structure, the content, you need the participation and buy-in of the students, as well as the administration. You need to think of what type of activities you can do and how you can do them in different manners. Can this be implemented using the instruction or using the institution's existing course management system like Blackboard or any other? Or do you need to figure out, or do you need to implement or figure out other methods? So taking into account what's the technology available. So there might be the need for the institution to provide a video conferencing platform, such as we're using. Cameras. We have to make sure that we have a good camera, maybe scalable audio, as we're finding out. It is important. And these extra infinity boards, where you can do multiple things on one board. So the significance of that is by allowing the institution to increase the flexibility, it offers the flexible teaching format, and we can have the social distancing built in. If the school suddenly has to shut down with this in place, we're already there. We are able to accommodate the students. There may be limited classroom space. So if we do this, then we can have better options for social distancing if you only have half the students in the class. The faculty. For the faculty, the significance is that it encourages them to use different types of design collaborative activities and helps them to increase student engagement. And by having this in place, if you have to suddenly shut down, the changes that need to take place in the curriculum and material are small. For the students, it offers customization. They have the choice of how they want to learn, and it encourages them to take greater initiative and responsibility for their learning. Now, one of the things that we may have to consider is that with the institutions, successful deployment, successful deployment of the model, we might have to look at the cost if we have to increase our technology, our processes. We have to have this in place, so the institution will have to go through and formalize their process. They also might have to do some research and look at the digital divide and how that is going to affect the students. Okay, for the faculty, with the HyFlex model, they might have extra preparation or facility time. They might need to have that because they're going to be required to have more material. They may have limited time and resources, or they might have to learn new support, new technology. For the students, they have to be flexible on how they learn. And for younger students, having them take more responsibility for their learning might require some parental assistance. So, is the HyFlex model the answer? Well, it does tend to break down the boundary between virtual and physical classrooms, and this is actually where education does seem to be going. It makes these courses successful because the instructors coordinate with the students. The instructors are able to offer different methods of learning to the different students, so students can make their choice, and they have more responsibility for their progress. So it might help institutions move to a more customized teaching and learning approach, and it might help them consider the needs of individual students. And I think Noriza is going to talk about the idea of how do you make a course compliant. And this might blend into this type of discussion.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Toni. That was wonderful, because now I understand better what is this HyFlex model, and I like the idea of flexibility in the classroom. And also with this COVID-19, students and the teachers alike and us lecturers are actually exploring this idea of flexibility, and we are discovering new things. I think your model fits in very well with what we are coping now, this new way of being in the education system. So, as what Toni said, we will invite Dr. Noriza to share with us how this model is being applied in your setting, Dr. Noriza.
Okay, so are we still good with time?
Okay.
Okay, hold on one second. Okay, so we are at the stage where we are now rushing to put digital content online, and then we are very much rely on digital services for about almost everything. So along with that, don't forget something that comes along with it, something that we have to be aware of, and this is web accessibility. Now, it may not be new to some of us, but I think in Malaysia, it's probably something that is new,
Yes,
correct?
it's true. Correct.
Okay, so this presentation aims at creating awareness regarding web accessibility. Now, it doesn't only affect or benefit people with disabilities, it actually benefits everybody.
Disability.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so about 1 billion people, that's a lot of people in the world, is living with a disability. So what is web accessibility? Is actually a measure of how everyone, including them, can access and use electronic information and interact with online materials and platforms effectively. So it is very important to consider this when we design our online or digital course materials. Okay. Now, in the United States, there are about 61 million adults who live with a disability. That's also a lot of people. Now, US has a more strict law regarding web accessibility than any other countries. But just a quick note. Now, even if, let's say, Malaysia doesn't really enforce it, there's no really strict rule. But if your digital content is uploaded to a US-based platform or system, then the company or the institution hosting your digital content will still be liable. Okay, so that includes all third-party content or tools.
Interesting to know. Yeah.
Okay, now the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, we call it WCAG, is the one that is widely used worldwide for as a standard for accessibility laws and regulation. Now, again, the US is they have a very strict ADA law that mandates that the digital space must provide equal opportunity, equal access for everyone. So in the case of higher ed in the US, we must comply with section 508. So I will not get into detail about section 508 because that's another session to discuss. Now, what about the world? How's the world doing about it? So as you can see, as of June of last year, it looks like we still have a long way to go. And Malaysia is not even included.
Yes.
So we do have a long way to go. Okay, so when we talk about being compliant, what does it mean? What needs to be compliant? So it is all digital content. Website, web application, mobile application, and all the documents all the digital documents that you upload online. Okay, and so we talk about people with disabilities. So who are we referring to? So basically, there are 5 main categories of disabilities: people with visual disabilities, auditory, cognitive, motor skill, and then I just throw in speech disabilities as well. So we have to be aware of this. People with vision impairment, they use screen readers to read out and to navigate our content. People with auditory or hearing impaired individuals, they need captions. So whenever you have sound on, you must provide transcript or captions whenever you have video content. And then basically people with cognitive disability, they have trouble performing mental tasks that the average person is able to do. So they use technologies to simplify content to meet their needs. They use text to speech, screen readers, customized fonts, page colors, text simplification, and other techniques. Now, even though we have all these technologies, but we as designers and future course designers must consider our content to maximize, not maximize, minimize cognitive difficulty. So the concept of chunking, structural and visual organization are all very important. And then people with motor skills disabilities, they use assistive technologies that work through keyboard and then emulate the functionality of keyboard. And then speech impairment individuals, they use voice or speech recognition or speech to text programs. So we have to kind of visualize how they navigate our content. Okay, so when should we care about accessibility?
Yeah.
In my honest opinion, it has to start right now, and it has to begin with us. It is our responsibility as, course designers, course developers, course content creators to help bridge this usability gap. We have the power to make sure that everyone have access to what we create, regardless of ability or the context or the situation. But one thing we have to remember is that it is great that we are making our work accessible because it brings better experience to everybody.
Yeah.
Are you feeling daunted yet? But don't be, because it all begins with an awareness. We start small, we work progressively, we can embed it in our work style, have a change, a mindset change, cultural shift. And a lot of people are saying, is it really difficult and expensive making content accessible? So the answer is not really. So I'm going to show you in the next few slides how we can debunk this. Okay? So first thing first, keep this in mind. You have to design with the user in mind. Make sure that you include inclusive design as your core principle or core consideration. Read and understand the basics of WCAG. And then there are multiple already accessible platforms, plugins, tools, software. Use those because that can propel you ahead with making your course accessible. Okay, so here are some simple steps that you can do to make your content more accessible. First is closed captioning. So if you use video, make sure that you use synchronized closed captioning. YouTube is very popular, so it does provide that CC tool. So make sure you turn that on. There are also a number of free captioning and subtitling tools online. They may not be perfect, but at least it is something that you can
Makes it more accessible. Yes.
And then what about outlet? Now, alt text is actually alternative text, and now it is a rule for accessible content design. You must provide alt text to any non-text content. So if you have images in your document, don't forget to add alt text. Okay? And what about URL? Yeah, as you know, URLs are not very human readable or screen reader friendly. So consider this. Look at how ugly it looks. Give it a name. Make sure that it makes sense, appropriate, and it's applicable. So the next one is okay, my slide is not blinking, but don't design content in such a way that is known to cause seizures, like scrolling, a lot of blinking, scrolling, screen text. Those are all, you know, if it doesn't benefit or doesn't bring any learning to it, then I think we better avoid giving such unnecessary, I would say, creation to the text. Okay, don't do this either, because you know using color is actually excellent to visualize material and then emphasize the importance of something, but not all color combinations are created equal. So here's the key: check color contrast and make sure that colors are not your only method of conveying important information. Okay? And when writing an accessible document, make sure you use logical headings and proper structure. So make sure Microsoft is accessible. So use the tools that they already provide for you. Use the styles to create headings and proper structure. Use this for formatting, and don't forget the fonts. Top 5 accessible fonts would be Arial, Badana, Tahoma, and they all must be size 12. Okay, and Microsoft also have check accessibility too. So don't forget to just check that. It will tell you the errors and it will show you how to fix it. Okay. All right. So it is actually all up to us. Now remember, don't do it because it is the law, or not do it because the law does not enforce it. Just do it because I think it is the right thing to do. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Noriza. That is well said. It is the right thing to do. Yeah. And I like your idea of inclusive design and accessibility and to provide equal access. I think we are all struggling with that because there are so many needs out there in the classroom. And how do we then make all this possible? But you did tell us, continue trying because you have, the awareness is important and to continue. And now we have, after hearing about this HyFlex model and how we can make everything accessible with all the tips, we now move on to everything that we do again is couched in language. So let's hear Dr. Margaret Gleeson and what she has to say about the changing landscape of classroom pedagogies, translanguaging and student identity, and how it affects the way of being in the classroom. Dr. Margaret Gleeson?
Kia ora tatou. Goodness, my mind is spinning having listened to my colleagues, and I feel as though I've learned a lot about accessibility. And so as you have said, Assunta, I would now like to move inside the classroom and look at things with language. point of view. So in my 5 minutes, I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned about language. You educators in Malaysia, I think, live and work in a country more than language, which is different from what we experience in New Zealand. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the notion of translanguaging, even though it's been a feature of life in countries like Wales for a long time. And the Welsh introduced this notion as they moved towards revitalising their language, which was a matter of falling to the influence of English. Essentially, as the two quotes on the screen suggest, translanguaging occurs when bilingual or multilingual learners and their teachers move flexibly among languages that are at their disposal in order to support learning. Now, this phenomenon is something that quite naturally, and I'm sure that you can think of instances you use elements of different languages in conversation or in classes with others. In fact, Dr. Assunta did this right at the beginning of our panel discussion. But theoretically, it rests on the notion that boundaries between languages are artificial. And languaging is a process of activating all one's linguistic resources. So it's not about bounded languages or named languages, having one language requiring another. It's about using them as a collaborative or as a composite resource. So how does translanguaging promote learning? Translanguaging is a socio-cultural concept and ensures that learning happens through collaborative talk. So when you tap into a learner's full repertoire of languages, this gently scaffolds them from their strongest language or their first language, their L1, into using the target language more and more. So once again, I emphasize it's a process, a scaffolding process. And not only that, when translanguaging is celebrated as a learning skill, teachers are acknowledging and endorsing students' identities as members of multiple linguistic communities who have rich resources to bring to their learning. So, how do I do it? I imagine that many of you who are here today are familiar with both of these pedagogical approaches, though you might not have particular. So firstly, spontaneous teaching happens when the teacher reads the landscape in their classroom and they decide on the spot they will need to change the language that they are using so that their learners can understand. So this happens on the spot and it happens on the spot intentionally. I think this is the most natural way that translanguaging However, planned translanguaging is much more intentional in that the teacher designs materials and designs certain tasks that are going to tap in deliberately to the languages available to their learners. A brief example from one study of how a teacher in language and Daniel study guided students to use four translanguaging strategies. Use their L1 to enable them to learn the L1 or in the L2. these are absolutely not exhaustive strategies, but I do thought of a nice example of what you might do. So teachers encourage their students to use their first language to the which they're engaging with in the teaching. So this is really depending on the L1. Or, moving along a little bit, they can intersperse what they're saying in their native language with English words. And this is particularly commonly used in language teaching and learning. Another way is a kind of paraphrasing, if you like, which is where you, if you can't think of the word you want, you would start with words that have the opposite meaning and explain what word that is not. And finally, this is another deliberate strategy where you recognise the cognates to your language and to the first language and the second languages. Now, the idea of translanguaging can seem especially challenging in only contexts. And many of the classes I've visited in Malaysia have, this is an English only written in the English department. However, as current educators and educators of the future, perhaps you can feel that learning is going to be enhanced. Both the teachers and the students are empowered to bring their full linguistic repertoire to support academic learning. So I will sit there and be available for conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Gleeson. It's interesting, what do you call it, insights on the concept on translanguaging, because if you're familiar with direct approach and all that, we don't actually entertain other languages in the classroom, but this is like using the repertoire of the language to actually function in another language. That's quite interesting. So let's listen to Aliza Alwi on the multi-modalities of teaching and learning. Puan Aliza?
Your mic.
Excuse Puan Aliza, your mic is muted. Yeah. Okay, unmute. Okay.
Puan Aliza, you're on air now.
Can you? Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Now we can hear you.
Can you
Carry
hear
on,
me?
Puan Aliza. Yes, we can hear you. Carry on.
Okay. All right. So I'm sorry, but I'm not able. I don't know why, but I'm not able to my PowerPoint. Right. So let's talk about the multimodalities of teaching and learning. Right. The Malaysian classroom is very much diverse. So that's why I was really listening intently to Dr. Gleeson translanguaging, explaining translanguaging. Like fascinating because we know, like what Zarina said, they are used to the method where do not encourage multiple languages in the classroom, and also Dr. Hando's and Noriza sharing about the HyFlex Model also is really fascinating because of how it can be accessed. It can be accessed by those who require the special needs. So let's look at the diverse Malaysian classroom. The Malaysian classroom is very diverse. It's really diverse because of the background of Malaysia that we are multiracial, multicultural. So students who are in the classroom have got a different background, a different first language, uh, different mother tongue, okay, different cultural background, um, and now with uh, the education for all policy, we also have students with special needs in our classroom. So it is really diverse, and teachers in the classroom schools have to deal with all this, the diversity, which is actually enriching. So they have challenge that this situation poses is that the teacher will have to look for a method that can suit everyone. And this is where differentiated learning comes in. It's very interesting to hear what one Dr. Noriza shared about just now, that we have there are applications that can help students with learning disabilities, cognitive disability, hearing impairment, visual impairment, speech impairment, because inclusivity is the focus of the Malaysian education now. We want to give everyone equal opportunity and accessibility to quality education. Right. So solution to this, to having diverse students in the classroom, would be the multimodal approach. If you go traditionally, even without technology, we use teachers use a text, which is writing and print. They use colors in using illustrations and images. Our students, teacher trainees, also came up with using cartoon strips in the classroom to teach language. Teachers now use audio, and they use music and movement in the classroom. Music not only in the music lessons, but also in English language lessons, in history lessons, in science lessons. Movement not only during lessons, also English language lessons, Bahasa Malaysia lessons, music lessons, all other subjects. Incorporate all these modes, different modes during teaching the classrooms. Teachers also use gestures and facial expressions. So this kind of using multi modes in the classroom would appeal to the different learning styles that the students have with them, bring with them in the classroom. And these different learning styles are actually shaped by the different cultures that they come from, the different background that they come from, different languages that they speak at home, and their worldview. You see, but now we begin to think about, like I said, we begin to think about this borderless um, situation that we have now. The world has become smaller because we can get in touch with a lot of things across countries, across borders, across the sea, across oceans and land, through the internet. And with this, and also with the IR 4.0 looming, we begin to think about the kind of skills that our students need. And at the back of our mind, we also think about these diverse classrooms that we have in Malaysia. So the skills that we need to develop would now become more transferable skills coming in. Education across the curriculum comes in. So we begin to look at how communication is going to take place now. The language that we use, the method that we use in order to communicate effectively, and making yourself understood. We begin to think about developing critical thinking. We begin to think about developing connectivity skills. How do we get students to connect to each other, right? And also, which is quite important and very important, as what Dr. Hando mentioned just now, and also I think Dr. Noriza also mentioned it, and especially Dr. Gleeson mentioned it. Cultural understanding is very, very important now. Now they not only have to understand the local cultures that are available, or that they are in, that they can see in the small classroom that they have, but now they also have to deal the culture that they are in touch with when they use the internet and communicate with people from outside Malaysia. So cultural understanding is also important. The other thing is creativity. Creativity also comes in. It's very, very important for students to be creative now. So these are the skills that we need to develop, is to get students to be innovative and creative, and to come up with something new, and to change something or improve something that is already being used. And another important thing that I think is, which is very important, is to be able to collaboratively. So we need to get students to have the skills to collaborate with others, not only in their classrooms but also online. So all these skills that we need to develop, apart from the subjects that we are teaching, we were overwhelmed when COVID-19 struck, and when we were all forced to be at home. All this, the teachers had to develop the skills themselves before imparting it to their students, and this had to be done in a very short time and very fast. So like I said just now, we had help. There were help provided to us by our colleagues, by teachers from education, through YouTube content, webinars, and platforms like this. So in order to develop these transferable skills, these skills that are really necessary for students to survive in the future world, we turn to the digital tools. I can see that the digital tools that Dr. Noriza suggested just now, and the HyFlex model that Dr. Hando shared just now, it all it accommodates, they accommodate what we now have to in this changing landscape of education in Malaysia. So the digital tools appeal to the different senses, and also to the different learning abilities, the different learning styles that students have. And teachers have to now make use of all these tools in order to get their students to be engaged. And the classroom, the virtual classroom that the teachers had to conduct, when we were all locked up in our own homes, they were fantastic. They were the digital tools were used simultaneously, and it has somehow or other, these have enhanced the traditionally done multimodal classroom, and hopefully they were all effective, and were successfully used by the teachers. So in terms of language learning, this multimodal approach contributes a lot to language learning, because we are concerned with the English language learning at our department. Um, uh, it contributes because these digital applications and the digital platforms actually provide context to the students. It provides meaning when you have to understand the instructions. You have to understand how to use certain applications and certain tools. It creates purpose for students to use the language and to understand the language. It provides them with real language use when they have to communicate with even a program, you know, and also from with students from other countries, perhaps. Okay, if the teachers had done that during the lockdown, it also provides them with ownership, because now they have to work not only when they work individually, whatever product that they come up with using the digital tool, it becomes theirs, you know. And you know, to see them them using the media and developing something, it gives ownership to the students more than before. And so and also this multimodal classroom accommodates students who are who needs special needs students, who needs special attention, who needs a customized learning. For example, previously they were only given text to read. So now it has to be changed. Now they've got to find audio text. Previously, when the presentation was done using just the PowerPoints, now they have to read it out to us. They have to present orally. So these digital tools enable our students and our teachers to use multimodal materials at the same time, simultaneously, and it actually enhance students' learning in the classroom. It also enhance teachers' own learning, because like I said just now, many teachers feel ill-equipped to use this, but when they are forced to use all these digital tools and look for these digital tools on their own, the skills somehow were acquired, and now when with the school reopening and the campuses reopening, we have our classes online. Some of the classes are blended, synchronous, asynchronous. So we do use some of the HyFlex model elements, which is the blended learning, where online modules were prepared before the semester reopens, and when the semester reopens, lecturers carry out their activities and their lessons online. Sometimes these are recorded for the benefit of students who might not have the internet connection at that time. They are also recorded for the benefit of students who have visual impairment, limited visual ability, so that they can have a look at it and listen to the class and lectures at their own time. So yes, I think the technology has actually enhanced our multimodal classrooms, and are actually effective in promoting teaching and learning, especially the English language learning in Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you, Puan Aliza. So we have listened to a lot of digital tools, digital platforms. So no doubt that the digital technologies over the last 2 decades at least have spread rapidly in much of the world. So access to digital technologies, the internet, mobile phones, and all the other tools to collect, analyze, and share digitally provides a whole new opportunities. However, the digital divide separating those individuals who have access to these new forms of technology from those who do not remains uncertain and ambiguous. So let's hear from Dr. Toni and Dr. Noriza. Will technology bigger the divide between the haves and the have-nots? And how can we balance it?
All right. And so give me one moment and I will pull it up.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Toni. Are we losing you?
It looks like we have lost Dr. Toni and Dr. Noriza for a moment. While we await them to rejoin us, we have a question for Puan Aliza and Dr. Margaret. Puan Aliza and Dr. Margaret, we often hear that we need to rethink how we are preparing the future workforce because, the education for the future, the changing landscape. Can you share with us some aspects that need this rethinking to prepare for the future when we are already grappling and struggling with the present now?
So, Dr. Gleeson can share first.
Can Dr. Gleeson, Dr. Margaret?
Certainly. Oh, there's lots of ways of going about this. I think the essential thing is that we are preparing people for the unknown. And so the skill that we have been trying to emphasize both in our curriculum and in our initial teacher education is the skill of learning how to learn and accepting that learning is going to be a lifelong experience, and you don't graduate from the Faculty of Education knowing everything. You graduate with a certificate that says that you are ready to keep learning, and this means that you're going to be learning for your whole life. Obviously, and my colleagues have talked about this quite a lot, COVID has really precipitated a focus on digital ways of learning as well. And in our I've got two things to say about this. One of them is that at the university before COVID, we were already giving our beginning teachers an opportunity to learn online. So we already had online classes that they could choose to take if they lived in isolated areas or had young families. They could do online learning, and we also offered face-to-face learning. But what this precipitated was a sort of a blurring of the lines, so that what had been face-to-face learning now needed to be delivered in a new way, not just translated, as my colleagues have said, as Toni said, not translated simply, I used to do this face-to-face, I'll do exactly the same thing online, but we needed to experiment more with different ways of learning the technologies, using the technologies. Our university has actually changed. So in response to COVID, we now have Microsoft Teams as a default position. And so if we go back into COVID lockdown again, we will always be able to communicate with each other. In the schools are well ahead of us. In New Zealand, the schools are ahead of the universities. So many schools have Microsoft Teams or Microsoft Classrooms or Google Classrooms. And so for many of our schools, especially the better resourced ones, they already had the platforms established, and the students continued to have sort of blended kinds of lessons. And the government actually, this is a small diversion, but I'll just have to say that the government, the Ministry of Education, rolled out laptops for children in disadvantaged areas so that they could continue with their learning. So anyway, just to recap, I think that the most important thing that we need to equip our teachers with in this changing environment is the ability to be flexible and the ability to continue to learn no matter what. So over to you, Aliza.
Dr. Margaret Gleeson, we have one question to you. Do you think this digital ways of learning is going to be a threat to your idea of translanguaging and student identity in the classroom? Is it a threat or is it going to be,
I actually think it shouldn't be a trap. It should be an affordance. It should, let me think, we are learning how to communicate with one another in the classroom face to face and take advantage of the learning that we already have, the knowledges that we already have. I think a digital environment just adds another level of opportunity, really. But my colleagues might have something else to add or something to differ on that one.
Now that we have, okay. We go to Toni.
Okay. Okay, let's come back to Dr. Toni and Dr. Noriza on how will the digital divide actually, how will technology, sorry, make bigger the divide between the haves and the have-nots, and how can we balance this? Dr. Toni, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I am in the process of sharing.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
And I think it's going to take a community effort to, there's always been a digital divide, but I think that with everybody working together, we can work and overcome that. Now, Dr. Mark, you mentioned the idea of the government coming together, and what can the government provide? The government could provide the laptops and make sure that the students have access to the technology that is necessary to learn. The schools and the teachers, the faculty, can make sure, maybe using the HyFlex model, that they design courses with this in mind. Maybe if students don't have high broadband internet, they can offer video, or they can offer audio. They could use text and images instead of video. They can let the students turn off their camera because that saves on the bandwidth. So there are things that everybody can do, parents. I think that in this case, what parents can do is to encourage the kids and to help them make the best choice, educational choice for them. But I think it's going to take all of us coming together to overcome the digital divide.
That's very true, Dr. Toni. I think with all of us working together and this collaboration, um, we can overcome this digital divide as long as we make sure that the students get an enriching and fulfilling education. Now, coming back to Puan Aliza, we come back to your question just now. It is always said that we need to rethink how we are preparing the future workforce. And as we teachers, we understand that load and that responsibility trusted upon us. Can you share with us some aspects that you think that needs rethinking from your point of view, Puan Aliza?
Yeah. From my point of view as a teacher trainer and looking at students in schools and all, anyway, I have to I need to say something about what Dr. Hando said just now, because my colleagues and I, we were always discussing about the impact that the pandemic had on us, on education. Previously, not digital tools, the broadband internet connection and all the gadgets, so they are considered luxury to some. But now, when we had to carry out educational activities online, everybody in the community, everybody from the government down to the parents and to the students, the teachers, everybody now realize how important all those gadgets are, how important. They are not luxury anymore, but they are now a necessity. So that's why we need a complete mind change, complete, turnaround about thinking that, these are not for the affluents, these are not luxury anymore. We need all this. So in rethinking the future workforce, this has got to come in as well. When we talk about teacher training, in teacher training, technology has to be built into every subject that we have in the curriculum. And not only that, Dr. Noriza shared with us just now the number of disabled people around the world, and these people have the rights to go into the workforce. So inclusive education is also very important and has to be built into every subject that teachers take in the curriculum. So the future workforce does not only mean teachers, but also the engineers and architects and doctors. So in their curriculum, I believe that technology and inclusive education should be built into those curriculum. Accessibility to education, accessibility to training should be made available to all people from all walks of life. Because in the future we will have diverse people working in every department, in every industry. And also technology is changing and is changing rapidly, and is getting more and more advanced. So what Dr. Gleeson said just now, lifelong learning. Yes, it is in the curriculum now, lifelong learning, but I think we really have to rethink about how to make it more, how to emphasize that, so that it doesn't stop. That we have to keep updating ourselves with new skills and new knowledge, and the knowledge is just it is out there, and it's really huge and vast, and these kind of skills, the transferable skills that I said just now, should be emphasized more, so that the future workforce is ready for any changes that they may face in the future.
Thank you, Puan Aliza, for sharing some of your thoughts regarding what we need to rethink as we prepare for the future workforce. I like what Dr. Margaret Gleeson said, learning how to learn. And with these digital ways of learning, that is something that we need to be aware of and need to be open to. Like what Dr. Toni said, let's be flexible. The hybrid model shows us ways and how we can be flexible in our teaching and learning in the classrooms, in our ways of thinking. Dr. Noriza talked about digital space and inclusive design. And with this emphasis of this diverse learners, inclusivity is very important. And she showed us some methods and tools that we can use to include everyone. And teaching technology has to be built into every subject, like what Aliza said. It's true, not just technology be built into every subject, but the inclusive pedagogy that goes with this technology. So it is lots of areas that we need to explore, lots of exciting new things for us to learn. And the landscape of education is changing. If we don't change with it, we may not be relevant for our young learners. Over to you.
Yeah. The panelists have shown to us how the landscape is changing. So it's time for us teachers to change. Okay, course designers to change. We have to relook at our strategies, our beliefs when designing course content. So when we look at the strategies, we have to celebrate individualities, like the HyFlex model, for example. Look at how students learn. Look at individual preference. And then Dr. Gleeson shared translanguaging in the classroom, for example. So they said that the most dangerous person is a person who reads only one book. So we have to open our mind. We have to stretch the perspective. For example, we have to look at all perspectives. If before this teaching language, for example, should be in one language perhaps. So we have to relook into the strategies. It's time to change. We have to also listen to marginalized people, for example, voices unheard of. For example, when designing course content, when putting course content online, for example, we have to meet the needs of the disabilities. Like Dr. Noriza mentioned, 1 billion people in the whole wide world is having at least one disabilities. And then when we talk about multimodalities, okay, it has to be absorbed in the hidden curriculum, for example, the cultural literacy, for example. So a lot of these exciting exchanges, yes, Dr. Assunta, today, and it's very enriching. We would like, maybe Dr. Assunta, yeah.
Zarina, now that we see Dr. Noriza
Noriza,
is back, Dr. Noriza, is there any parting words you want to share with us? Dr. Noriza, are you able to hear us? Any parting words, Dr. Noriza?
Yes, thank you. I would like to invite all of you again to consider the accessibility guidelines as part of your process, and that we should continue this conversation on why web accessibility matters. It is very important. It is our responsibility to champion it. And my last word is I end with let's all design digital content responsibly. Thank you very much.
Okay, it looks like we have come to the end of our e-forum. It has been a very stimulating and exciting experience. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone out there has also learned a lot. So we take this opportunity to thank everyone who has joined in, and especially our four panelists, Dr. Toni Hando, Dr. Noriza Abu Hassan Shaari, Dr. Margaret Gleeson, and Puan Aliza Alwi. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. IPG Ilmu Khas loves you and thanks you very much for your wonderful participation and input. Until we meet again. Just a reminder before we shut off, the attendance will now be on. So those of you who have joined our sessions, especially those of us from Malaysia, please sign in your attendance. Thank you.
Bye.